Financial regulation needs to be tougher. We need a retail sector that's more resilient and more able to deal with the kind of shock that we've seen. And to be clear, Chair, we accept that had we done that earlier, this would have been better for customers. Now, it's really hard to say what the price would be if Russia invades Ukraine, but let's say the average price over the course of the price cap goes to £200 or more, you would be seeing significant rises again in the price that people pay, if that were sustained.
It's been estimated, I think it was the CEO of Centrica who said that he thinks about £400 million of consumers' money has gone missing as a consequence of these companies going bust. Is that right?
So I don't think it will reach that level from the figures that we have.
What level do you think it will be?
So at the moment, in the settlements we've made so far, it's about 3%. We think, and this isn't a firm estimate, that may rise to about 10% of the overall level.
What does that mean in real money from consumers?
So that would be about, let's say, £7 out of the existing settlement, maybe rising up to £10.
At the moment, it's £2.45, and that
That's
accounts
right.
for 54 million. So if you think it's going to be £10, you're thinking it might be 200 million.
Something like that. Now, those figures aren't figures that we finished with. We're still going through those, but roughly of that order of magnitude. But the vast majority of the cost has been down to re-hedging people when they move from a failed supplier to another supplier, and that's about 85% of the cost that we're seeing.
Why wasn't consumer money ring-fenced so that companies couldn't spend it on other business costs?
So we had a proposal that was already in train to ask suppliers to return their credit balance to customers every year, which would have managed that cost. So that was already being implemented, but it wasn't finalised. But the argument, and when I look back at the arguments that were made, the argument was that this would make it very hard for small suppliers to operate. And as I say, if you go back through our history, there was a view that we needed to encourage small suppliers into the market. It's our view that we do need to ring-fence those credit balances further, and we're looking at mechanisms to do that. When you look at the forward prices right now, there is upward pressure in prices still, so you may see a rise in October, but the caution I have in sort of predicting that is I went back and looked at what we predicted in August when we announced this price cap, and the difference between those predictions, which were the price cap will stay roughly level, versus what we've seen, are huge. And to be honest, I look, as you can imagine, too frequently at the changes in the gas market. In fact, it's, you have to watch yourself. You can watch it much too much. The market really is looking at some factors which are fairly binary. And your member has already mentioned the Russia-Ukraine situation. That will clearly have an impact on supply, and that will clearly have an impact on price. So I'd caution against any projections, but if we just look at the forward market, so what the traders think right now, then it does look like there's upward pressure on prices. I've thought hard about this, and as we came up to the announcement and we saw the scale of this announcement rising, we've looked hard at what Ofgem can do, and we do have rules that we apply to suppliers and how they treat vulnerable customers. We do have a voluntary agreement with the industry, but quite frankly, the scale of these rises really can only be met by government action. So ultimately, it's a matter for government as to what they do to respond, and they've announced a package last week. As I'm sure you'll understand, it's not my position to comment on whether that's a good or a bad package, but this is something that only government can intervene to address the scale of what we've seen. That's not to say we won't play our part. That's not to say the industry won't do what it can, and I hope they do. But this is of a scale that is simply not really what anybody else can manage.